You know that feeling when you catch yourself doing the exact same self-sabotaging habit at 2 a.m.? Like, you are fully aware it is a terrible idea, and yet, there you are anyway.
Oh, absolutely. Just completely ignoring your own common sense.
Right. Or maybe you suddenly realize you are dating the exact same toxic person, just, in a different font.
Yeah, a new face, but the exact same red flags.
Exactly. Or you're having the exact same argument with your boss for the fifth time this month. And modern internet culture will look at that and tell you that you're just, like, manifesting bad vibes.
Right, the whole you attracted this energy thing.
Exactly. But clinical psychology says something much wilder. Your brain is actually doing this on purpose because it actively prefers a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven.
That is such a heavy way to put it, but it is incredibly accurate.
So today, let's dive into why. We're unpacking a huge stack of sources today to map out the psychological mechanics of why we unconsciously trap ourselves in these painful loops, and more importantly, how to finally break the cycle.
And the goal for this deep dive is to literally make it make sense mechanically. We are not doing a toxic positivity session here.
Thank goodness.
Right. We're not just going to tell you to think good thoughts. And this won't be a dry clinical lecture either. We are looking under the hood at the human brain to see the exact cogs and gears that keep us repeating the same arguments, the same burnout, and the same mistakes.
Because once you understand the machinery of your own self-sabotage, it loses a lot of its power over you.
Exactly. It demystifies the whole thing.
I love that. So let's get right into the machinery then. Because one of our sources, clinical psychologist Dr. Leslie Becker Phelps, highlights a physical phenomena that serves as just a perfect metaphor for what it feels like to be completely stuck in life.
Oh, it's a fantastic starting point. So she references a 2009 research study by Sugran and colleagues that looked at human survival navigation.
Like getting lost in the woods.
Yeah, exactly. Specifically, what happens when people get lost in a dense forest or, a desert. The researchers found that when humans lack an external reference point, meaning they can't see the sun, the moon, or like a distinct mountain, they absolutely cannot walk in a straight line.
Wait, really? They just can't do it.
Nope. Without that external anchor, their internal sense of direction completely fails. And they literally physically just walk in circles.
That is a terrifying thought. If you're ever out hiking, you think you're making progress, but you're just looping.
Right. And Becker-Phelps connects this physical reality to our emotional lives. When we are dealing with chronic anxiety, depression, or even just a bad habit we can't shake, like vaping or doom scrolling or going back to a toxic we essentially lack an internal GPS.
We don't have a reliable reference point for how to navigate our way out of the distress.
Exactly. So what do? We just walk in psychological circles. We exhaust ourselves only to end up exactly where we started.
Man, that's the trap right there.
Mm-hmm.
You think you are moving forward because you are expending all this energy.
Yeah, but clinically speaking, your emotional compass is just spinning. When you lack a strong sense of compassionate self-awareness to guide you, you inevitably fall back on whatever behavior is most well-worn.
Okay, wait, hold on. I have to push back on this analogy just a bit.
Sure, go for it.
Because if I am lost in the woods and walking in a circle, I am doing it by accident. My body is just failing to walk straight. But in life, a lot of this stuff feels incredibly voluntary.
You mean you're doing it?
Yes. I know that 2 a.m. doom scrolling is ruining my sleep. I know the toxic X is a terrible idea. Why doesn't my conscious brain just, hit the override button? Why is my brain actively choosing the painful route?
Well, it goes deeper than just an accident of navigation. It comes down to a concept called repetitive negative thinking, or RNT.
Repetitive negative thinking, okay.
Yeah, according to clinical psychologist Dr. Daniel Marston, RNT is deeply tied to our biological fight-or-flight response. You have to remember that your brain is fundamentally a survival engine. It is not designed to make you happy. It is designed to keep you alive. So when you face an emotional challenge, you experience distress. Your brain instantly perceives that emotional discomfort as a biological threat.
Like a literal predator in the woods.
Exactly. It desperately wants to feel safe.
Yeah.
And to the human survival engine, safe does not mean healthy. Safe means familiar.
That is wild. So because I have survived the fallout of my bad habits before, my brain just codes them as a safe bet.
You nailed it. Building a new healthy coping mechanism requires creating completely new neural pathways,
Yeah.
and that takes a massive amount of metabolic energy.
Our brains are kind of lazy, right?
Extremely lazy. In a moment of panic or stress, it does not want to expend the energy to learn a new trick. It wants the path of least resistance. Marston points out that we see this all across the animal kingdom, too.
Really? Like where?
Well, repetitive behaviors in animals are used almost exclusively when something is fundamentally wrong in their environment.
Oh, like a tiger pacing back and forth in a small enclosure at a zoo.
Spot on. That's exactly it. If there is high stress or a major physiological disruption, animals abandon looking for the most effective behavior and cling to what is familiar.
Because they're just trying to cope with the cage.
Yes. When they are healthy, they approach each new situation individually. But under stress, both human and non-human animals fall back on repetitive pacing. For a tiger, it's pacing a physical cage. For a human, it's pacing through the same negative thought patterns or the exact same destructive relationship.
Wow. So complaining to my friends for 3 hours about the exact same problem isn't me processing my feelings. It's literally just my brain pacing the cage because it's a cheap, low-energy way to feel like I'm doing something.
That is a brilliant way to put it. It feels like action, but it's actually just momentum keeping you stuck in the loop.
Okay, so if the brain relies on familiar complaints just to feel safe, it makes me look at this whole online manifestation trend completely differently.
Oh, let's get into the manifestation stuff.
Right, because if we look at the HuffPost source discussing the law of attraction, modern internet culture, especially on places like TikTok, will tell you that complaining actually summons bad luck.
Yeah, that you attract your problems simply by focusing on them.
Exactly. It sounds a bit woo-woo on the surface,
Yeah.
but the article actually makes a really biting point about human behavior. It says that complaining about a rude boss or a bad relationship literally becomes an addiction. You generate momentum for the problem by giving it all your attention.
And see, the internet calls that manifesting your own mess. But clinical psychology has a much more grounded, mechanical term for this.
Which is?
Cognitive distortions. These are not magical energies. They are just mental shortcuts our brains take to deal with the overwhelming uncertainty of life.
Okay, so it's not the universe punishing me.
No, not at all. When we complain obsessively or dwell on the negative, we aren't summoning bad vibes from the cosmos. We are actively hardwiring our neural pathways to only perceive threats, slights, and failures.
Let's talk about how that actually works in real time, because the help guide source goes super deep into these specific distortions. And reading through them, it feels incredibly relatable.
Oh, they are universally relatable.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Like, for example, the distortion of jumping to conclusions, specifically the subtype of mind reading.
Ah, yes, mind reading.
You text someone, right? They don't text back for 3 hours, and your brain doesn't think, oh, they're in a meeting. Your brain immediately goes, they think I'm boring, they hate me, and they are actively ignoring me.
That's a classic example. The brain creates a full narrative out of thin air just to protect you from the uncertainty of waiting.
It's like tragic fan fiction about your own life.
That's exactly what it is. And another major one Help Guide points out is emotional reasoning.
How does that one work?
This is the flawed assumption that your temporary emotional state reflects objective reality. So you think, I feel lonely right now, therefore everyone in the world must be actively avoiding me because I am fundamentally unlovable.
Oh, man, that is brutal.
It is. Or there's catastrophizing, where you expect the absolute worst possible outcome from a really minor inconvenience.
Oh, I know catastrophizing intimately well.
Mm.
A typo in an email to your boss suddenly means you are going to be fired, you'll never work in the industry again, you'll be evicted, and you'll end up living under a bridge. The leap in logic is just like Olympic level.
It really is. And while we can laugh at how absurd it sounds out loud right now, in that moment, your brain is flooding your body with cortisol as if living under that bridge is a guaranteed reality.
Your body physically reacts to the fake scenario.
Exactly. And this creates an incredible irony, which the HuffPost piece highlights when discussing acting out of fear. Let's say you are terrified of getting sick, right?
Okay.
You might obsessively wash your hands, avoid all social contact, and monitor every single tiny sensation in your throat. Ironically, that highly fearful behavior puts your entire mental focus exclusively on sickness.
Right. You're essentially keeping yourself in a sick, fearful loop because your brain just filters out the positive reality, like the fact you were currently perfectly healthy, and it only sees the potential for disease.
The mechanism here is that cognitive distortions are the brain's highly misguided attempt at problem solving. Your brain thinks, well, if I anticipate the worst possible scenario, I will be prepared for it.
But that's not what actually happens, is it?
Not at all. What actually happens is it dictates your behavior in a way that engineers the exact problem you were trying to avoid.
Oh,
Take the mind reading example with the text message. Your suspicious, anxious thoughts make you act really coldly toward your partner the next time you see them.
right, because you're mad at them for something they didn't even do.
Exactly. And that coldness causes an argument, which creates distance, which eventually leads to the breakup you were terrified of in the first place.
Yeah.
You didn't manifest it with magic. You literally engineered it with distorted thinking.
That is such a crucial distinction. We are literally building our own traps. But here's where it gets really interesting for me, and honestly, a little confusing.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I can logically see this distortion right now, if I can look at my life and say, okay, this relationship is a cage and my productivity habits are just catastrophizing in disguise, why does the internal pull remain so strong?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. If my conscious brain recognizes the trap, who is actually in charge here?
Well, to answer that, we really have to look beneath the conscious mind. Historically, Freud used the metaphor of an iceberg, where the conscious mind is just the tiny tip above the water.
Right, the classic iceberg.
But for a modern audience, I think a much better analogy is your smartphone. Think of your conscious mind as the home screen, the apps you're actively opening and looking at right now.
Okay, tracking with you.
Your subconscious is all the background apps. You don't see them running, you aren't interacting with them, but they are secretly eating up 90% of your battery life and processing power to keep certain things running in the dark.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So what exactly are these background apps doing?
They are quarantining distress. Classic psychoanalysis tells us that we repress ideas, memories, and impulses that are simply too overwhelming for the conscious mind to process on a daily basis.
So we just wipe them away.
Basically, yes.
Wow.
If a truth threatens your core identity, the brain just shoves it into the background. But those repressed feelings don't just disappear. They generate a massive amount of psychic tension.
They drain the battery.
Exactly, they drain the battery. Now, if we connect this to the work of Albert Ellis and his rational emotive behavior therapy, alongside Karen Horney's psychoanalytic theories, we uncover a specific psychological mechanism called the tyranny of the shoulds.
The tyranny of the shoulds. That's a very heavy phrase. How does that mechanism work?
It's based on how we internalize extremely toxic, rigid societal expectations. We take basic preferences and mutate them into absolute demands.
Give me an example of that.
Things like, I should always be perfectly productive, or I should be universally recognized and loved by everyone I meet, or I should never, ever make a mistake. Horney explained that we build a hypothetical ideal self based entirely on these impossible rules.
But nobody's a perfectly productive robot, so we are setting ourselves up for a game we literally cannot win.
Precisely. Your real self, the actual flawed, tired human being you are, can never meet the demands of that ideal self.
Because it's a fantasy.
Right, and because the real self constantly fails to meet those demands, the friction creates what Horney called a despised self. We start to harbor this deep resentment toward our own humanity. We hate ourselves for falling short of an impossible standard.
Oh, wow. So this actually answers the question of why we stay in painful situations.
Yes, it does. Why do we tolerate the toxic boss? Why do we stay in the relationship where we are treated poorly? Because deep down in that subconscious programming, the despised self thinks we deserve it.
That is so dark.
It is. We unconsciously trap ourselves in bad situations because we truly believe it is the appropriate punishment for failing to meet those arbitrary shoulds.
That is incredibly heavy, but it makes so much sense of modern hustle culture, too. We think, well, I couldn't keep up with my insane 5 a.m. morning routine, and I didn't optimize every single second of my day, so I'm inherently lazy. Therefore, I deserve to be stuck in this job I absolutely hate.
Exactly. You are manifesting your own punishment.
I know someone listening right now just had to pull their car over because that hit way too close to home.
It is a universally common human experience. The internal dialogue just becomes this echo chamber of self-punishment. And here is the truly sinister part of the mechanism.
It gets worse.
It gets worse. The longer you stay in that loop, the more normal the punishment feels. Your brain recalibrates to accept chronic dissatisfaction as its baseline for safety.
Okay, so now that we have completely dismantled everyone's psyche and made us all realize exactly how we are engineering our own suffering, let's talk about getting out of the woods.
Let's go.
How do we actually break the loop? Because self-help culture makes stepping out of your comfort zone sound like this fun, breezy weekend activity, like just take a leap of faith. But in reality, Abandoning a familiar neurosis doesn't feel like a fun leap. It feels like a literal existential crisis.
It absolutely feels like a crisis, and the clinical literature validates that feeling entirely. Kurt Lewin, who is a pioneer in social psychology, created a three-step model of change that breaks this down. The steps are unfreezing, changing, and freezing.
Okay, unfreezing.
Yes. The critical, most misunderstood detail here is that first step. Lewin emphasized that unfreezing is inherently painful, confusing, and highly distressing.
Why does it have to hurt so much, though? Why can't the brain just say, oh, good, we are finally leaving the toxic job, yay for us?
Because you are dismantling the very cognitive structures that have kept you safe for years. Your brain treats the loss of an identity, even a miserable identity, as a literal threat to your survival.
Wow.
When you unfreeze, you are actively destroying the cognitive distortions and the shoulds that you relied on to make sense of the world.
It's like demolishing the foundation of a house while you are still living inside it. No wonder the brain sends out panic signals.
Yeah,
You are losing your familiar self.
that's a great way to look at it.
It feels like taking off a really heavy, itchy winter coat in the middle of a blizzard. You hated the coat, it was super uncomfortable, but without it, you are freezing and completely vulnerable to the element.
Exactly. You feel exposed.
So what is the survival guide for this unfreezing phase? How do we endure the cold without just panicking and running right back to the bad habit?
The sources offer some incredibly practical mechanics for this. First, we look at Carl Rogers, a founder of humanistic psychology. He talked about the good life.
The good life. Sounds
Yeah.
nice.
It does, but for Rogers, the good life is not a fixed destination. It's not a finish line where you are suddenly perfectly happy and perfectly healed forever. The good life is a process. It's a direction.
Okay, so it's ongoing.
Right. And the core mechanism of that process is staying incredibly flexible and open to experience rather than forcing reality to fit into our preconceived defensive structures.
Which is the exact opposite of a cognitive distortion.
Mhm.
A distortion rigidly demands that the world fit into our anxious expectations. Like, they didn't text back, so they hate me. It's a closed loop.
Exactly. Rogers argued that to break the loop, you have to accept reality exactly as it is in this moment without raising your defenses.
That sounds tough.
It is. It means sitting in the uncertainty of a delayed text message without letting your brain write a tragedy about it. Second, we can apply a mechanical technique from the help guide source called distancing.
Distancing. How does that work?
Well, when you have a negative thought like, I'm a total failure, you don't just accept it as objective truth. You practice taking a third-party view of your own mind.
How do you do that practically, though? Because when I'm spiraling, I am very much in the spiral. I'm not a third party.
A great visualization is to imagine your thoughts moving along on a mental conveyor belt. You observe the thought, you acknowledge it is there, but you do not jump on the belt with it. You create a psychological buffer between the stimulus and your reaction.
Oh, I love that visual. You're just the factory inspector watching the anxiety roll by on the line. Like,
Oh,
yep, there goes the imposter syndrome. Look sturdy, have a safe trip down the belt. You see it, but you don't take it home with you.
that is exactly it. It stops the momentum of the distortion dead in its tracks. And finally, Dr. Becker-Phelps brings us back to what she calls compassionate self-awareness.
Right, we mentioned that earlier.
Yeah. Remember how Horney said we develop a despised self that we constantly punish? To dismantle that background app, you have to actively treat yourself with the exact same compassion you would offer a good friend.
Which is so much harder than it sounds. We are so mean to ourselves.
It requires immense practice, but think about it. If your best friend made a mistake at work, you wouldn't look them in the eye and tell them they are a worthless loser who deserves to be miserable forever.
I mean, I hope not.
Right. You would tell them it's okay, that everyone messes up and that there is room to grow. You have to start redirecting that empathy inward. It is not toxic positivity. It is actively disputing the distortion with facts and then forgiving your brain for having a false alarm.
It's essentially about becoming your own internal GPS, but reprogramming it with a really kind, supportive voice setting. Not the one that aggressively recalculates and yells at you for taking a wrong turn, but one that just says, okay, we took a detour, let's find the next best route.
I love that.
You don't beat yourself up for being anxious. You just gently guide your focus back to reality.
That is the exact mechanism of change right there. You endure the pain of unfreezing by anchoring yourself in self-compassion.
Okay, we have covered some serious structural ground today.
Yeah.
So to summarize this massive psychological roadmap for you, if you keep finding yourself repeating the exact same mistakes, dating the same type of person, or fighting the same burnout battles, you are not
broken. Not at all.
Your brain is not defective. Your brain is actually just aggressively trying to protect you. It is choosing the familiar comfort of your past over the terrifying, unpredictable nature of the unknown.
It's just a misplaced survival tactic.
Exactly. But knowing why your brain is doing this is your secret weapon. Change requires actively catching those cognitive distortions, like mind reading and catastrophizing, dismantling the toxic should society implanted in you, and most importantly, sitting with the sheer awkward discomfort of doing something completely new. You have to endure the existential pain of unfreezing.
And if we look at everything we've unpacked today, from the way humans walk in literal circles in the woods, to the background apps draining our mental batteries, to the brain's biological addiction to the familiar, it leaves us with a really powerful paradigm shift.
Let's hear it.
If your deepest fears and your most repetitive, frustrating problems are actually just comfortable habits in disguise, what would happen if you decided to let yourself be entirely, deeply uncomfortable for just one day?
Man, what a question to leave off on. If you want to stop waking up in Groundhog Day, you might just have to brave the dread of doing something totally unfamiliar. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning your loops, be incredibly kind to your brain when it gets scared, and we will catch you next time.